Hey guys, Paul Argueta here. Today I'm going to cover with you which home valuation sites are the most accurate, and I'm going to tell you how to price your home. Thank you for visiting our channel. Please make sure that you subscribe so that you can have access to all of the latest and greatest content that we are creating and curating for you. Also make sure that you ring the bell. Click on the alerts button. When you do that, you'll receive alerts anytime we upload new videos about some of the properties we're representing, real estate agent training, or entrepreneurial advice. Before we get started, I want to make sure that we thank and recognize our sponsor. The sponsor for today's video is the College of Real Estate, where you can complete all of the courses required to get your real estate salesperson's license and your NMLS mortgage broker's license as well. They have weeknight classes, weekday classes, and weekend classes to fit your schedule. Visit them at collegeofrealestate.net. Let's talk about online home valuation sites. I'm going to give you the pros and cons of each of these sites and, in my opinion, which is the most accurate. So let's start with the big four. The big four are what I call RRTZ: Realtor, Redfin, Trulia, and Zillow. No, not Ritz crackers. Please, Nabisco, don't send me any more cease and desist letters. RRTZ: Realtor, Redfin, Trulia, and Zillow. Now, the pros of using these sites for your instant valuations are, number one, that it's free, and most valuation sites are free anyway. But number two, there's no real registration required to use these sites. Number three, they're very easy and simple to use, and they look great. They are seamless. It's very fast, quick. I mean, it isn't that difficult to figure out. We're going to talk about a few other sites that make it a little bit more difficult, but the big four, it's very simple and easy to use. So those are the pros of using those sites. Now, let's talk about the cons. The first con of using these sites is that these instant valuation sites their algorithms will rely on distance and time. And normal appraisal techniques require that we use comparables within a 1 mile radius. If you really want to get an accurate depiction of what your property is worth, then you really want to try to keep it within a 1/4 mile radius. Now, if we're talking about condos, townhomes, or planned urban development communities, if it's a condo, you want your most recent comparable sale or most recent active listing to come from the same building that you reside in. Those are always going to be the best comparables. These, or the big four, RRTZ will use a distance, to determine which is the best comp. Now, somebody can argue that, hey, because they're using distance, you're still going to get those comps that are within the same building or same gated community, and that's true. But because they can go as far as a mile, you'll also see some comps that might skew the values higher, or it might skew the values lower. You never really know. So when you're looking for comparable listings, comparable active sale listings, or comparable sold listings, you tend to want to stay within a 1/4 mile radius. And because they're using a distance search to find other recent sales, what'll happen is you can actually get comparables that are in a completely different neighborhood, even though they fall within the 1/4 mile radius. Another thing that you want to avoid when valuing your home, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, is you want to avoid any natural or man-made barriers, if you will. So major streets, freeways, bridges, mountains, rivers, streams. I somehow have gotten lost here. I'm just thinking about walking by a stream. Anyway, so you have to avoid any of those things. And when you're searching within a 1/4 mile radius, depending on where you live, there is a good chance that you will come across those major arteries or freeways that you shouldn't cross. And there's that whole north and south thing, which we'll talk about a little bit later on. Another con of using the big four, or as I call it, RRTZ, is that when you're trying to get the value of multifamily properties, and when I say multifamily, I'm referring to 4 units or less. 5 units or more would be considered multifamily commercial, right? So they are definitely, the big four are definitely not going to be able to get you a valuation for 5 units or more. And it's still challenging for them to accurately get values on 4 units or less, and here's why. The big four cannot take things into account like rent control. And there are certain cities that have rent control, including Los Angeles, where your value is strongly going to be based on the rents that you're currently collecting from the tenants that reside in those properties. So the big four cannot take those things into account without knowing that information. So that's one of the other cons of using the RITs, Realtor, Redfin, Trulia, and Zillow to get your instant valuation when we're talking about multifamily. I don't know if this is a con per se, but I'm going to share it with you anyway. One of the things that we've noticed in the industry is that when we place a property up for sale and the listing is shared through all the syndication online, so it goes through Zillow, it goes to Realtor, it goes to any other online portal that uses IDX or Internet Data Exchange information, is that when we place a property up for sale, these portals will then make their values initially very close to what the original list price was. In fact, this could be urban legend, but I am a part of quite a few chat boards and message boards on social media. And there was a time where one agent placed a property up for sale, and rumor has it that he hit a couple zeros too many, a couple mistaken keystrokes, and it priced the property up to $1 billion. It went up through syndication and it was promoted on all these sites. And there was a couple sites, I'm not going to say which ones, that then placed their online valuation of that property for close to $1 billion. So clearly it wasn't worth $1 billion, it was just a mistake. But what I've noticed, and forget properties, we're talking millions or billions, what I'm noticing is that these properties, once they hit those portals, their valuations from when they're active listings tends to be skewed or lean towards what the original list price was. The other thing that we've noticed is that when these properties sit on the market, the longer they sit on the market, the more those valuations start to decline, right? Now, it's common sense that if it hasn't sold within 45 to 60 days, right, there's a good chance that the property is not worth that price, right? We all understand that. But they've adjusted those algorithms to reflect that. So those values for those active listings tend to steadily decline the longer the property sits on the market. And again, I don't know if that's a con or a negative thing per se. I just know that that's something that we see on a regular basis on our end. Portal number 2, forsalebyowner.com. Now, if you don't know, forsalebyowner.com was recently acquired by Rocket Homes. Back then it was known as In-House Realty, but Rocket Homes has acquired For Sale by Owner. They are definitely making headway as a competitor for Redfin and Zillow, and they really want to have their own standalone platform. And I will tell you that I've gone on the site and I've tried to find the valuation. When you initially go to forsalebyowner.com, because it is a site where you can post your property up for sale, it seems or it feels as if initially all they really want you to do is advertise your property for sale on that portal. So it can be a little challenging finding the valuation button on that site to get the value, but I did try it, I did use it, and once you plug in your address, it's a little clunky, but it takes a little bit longer, so the process isn't quite as seamless as the big four, but it does give you the value instantly. And when you get your value from forsalebyowner.com, the same cons that we talked about earlier from the big four, from RITs, is exactly what you're going to experience when you search it on forsalebyowner.com. You're going to realize that their algorithm is based on radius and time, and the same cons that I talked about earlier are going to apply here as well. So after the big four, and then For Sale by Owner, you're going to start looking at other online portals that are provided by major lenders. Banks like Chase, Wells Fargo, Bank of America, Citibank. And these lenders do have online valuation sites as well. What my experience has been using them has been that they're very slow and they're very clunky. And all of the stuff that I talked about from the big four, all of those cons will still apply to this site. most of these sites for the banks are providing you this information clearly because they want you to use them for financing purposes. And so it's not very user friendly, and it's not necessarily designed to get you to register for your valuation in as much as they want you to use them for your home loan. So far we've gone through the big four, right? RITS, Realtor, Redfin, Trulia, Zillow. And then following the big four, we then talked about forsalebyowner.com, right? We talked about their valuation. And then after that, we talked about the banks. Most bank portals do have instant valuations. They're slow, they're clunky, they're just as accurate, but again, they don't take into account things like condition and sometimes the distance, which may cross into a whole different neighborhood, all right? So after the banks, we'll then talk about the franchise sites. So there are certain sites. Now, I will say that I did look for these valuation sites that provided instant values, and the only one that I could find presently was RE/MAX. The vast majority of the other franchise sites like Century 21, Coldwell Banker, Sotheby's, and any of the other ones that you can think of, if I'm Keller Williams, if I'm forgetting any of them, please forgive me. That doesn't mean that they're not any less valuable. All I'm saying is that the vast majority of those valuation sites tend to be sites that are designed to capture information, and I use the same concept on my own website, so I'm not knocking it, okay? RE/MAX was the only site that I found where you could punch in your address and get an instant valuation. The vast majority of the others, again, including my own, was really designed to capture information so that they could go back and provide you with a more accurate valuation that they could either email to you or text you a little bit later on. The last and final valuation sites that I am going to recommend are REHrealestate.com and TalkToPaul.com. Now, if you don't know, TalkToPaul.com is me, and REH Real Estate is the brokerage that I founded with my partner. So yes, if I didn't give them a plug, right, what would that say about me? So again, our sites do offer online valuation models. You will need to go in there. You will need to register. We will provide you with an accurate CMA, which is a comparable market analysis, and it will take into account all of the stuff that I'm going to cover with you next as I go into how to price and value your home and some of the little things that you should take into account. So, just to recap, the online valuation model is very simple. It's easy. There's no registration required, but there are some cons in that model because of the distance search, because they do cross into other neighborhoods, even though it might be completely different zip codes. Because it does fall within a quarter-mile radius, you might start to see comparables that don't make sense. In addition to that, I talked a little bit earlier about how the values are skewed once we put properties on the market. How does that affect their algorithm? How does that affect how they will value your home in comparison to the active properties that are up for sale, taking into account that they're valuing them very close to what we're originally listing them for? And in some cases, there are some listings on the market that will be overpriced. You can't avoid that. There are some sellers that are just testing the market to see if they can get their price. And again, I use that example of how one agent made a keystroke error and priced the home at $1 billion, and the online portals lean towards that $1 billion valuation as well. How would that impact your valuation as well? I'm not knocking the online values. I think they're a great tool. I think they're simple and easy to use. I use them quite often, as a matter of fact, to compare what their valuation would be versus what my valuation would be. But I will say that the ones where you do go in and you do register and you do provide them with the information is going to be a little bit more accurate, just because you've got somebody that's personally, analyzing it themselves. So it's kind of like comparing it to off the rack and bespoke, right? Online instant valuation, I personally would compare it to an off the rack type of valuation, and a valuation where you're going to register and provide information. You're going to get something that's bespoke, that's a little bit more custom to you, especially if we're talking about multifamily. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so let's talk about pricing your home yourself. Now, so you've gone onto one of these portals, let's say you've gone onto the instant online valuation site, you've used one of the big four, if you will, you saw your value, and you still want to make sure that it's accurate, okay? Here's a few things that you want to take into account when pricing your home. Number one, you can compare your property to properties that are 20% larger or 20% smaller than yours based on your square footage. Now, I know that there's going to be some properties, and there are going to be some homeowners that are going to say, well, Paul, you know what, I have an extra 400 or 500 square feet worth of space. It's just not permitted. And while I appreciate that, and I could see the value in that, and I'm sure that there's other buyers that will see the value in that, if it hasn't been permitted and it doesn't show up on county records, you're not going to be able to count that towards the value of the property. So 20% up and 20% down. You can compare home sales and active listings that are 20% larger and 20% smaller than yours. How do you adjust for bedroom and bathroom count? So if you have a 4-bedroom, 2-bathroom home, right, and you're looking at a house that's a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom home, and they sold for a particular price, then what you would do is, because your property has 1 bedroom more, you would adjust up $10,000 for that bedroom. Okay? Now, this does not work across the board. This is just simple techniques that we in the industry will use, okay? But typically, it's about a $10,000 increase in value per bedroom and a $5,000 increase in value per bathroom, right? That also works the other way around. So if you have a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom home, and you see a 3-bedroom, 1-bathroom home that sold for a specific price, well then when you're making adjustments, you would reduce what they sold for or what they're selling for by $10,000 to reflect that your house is only a 2-bedroom, 1-bath versus a 3-bedroom, 1-bath. I hope that makes sense. Now that's simple valuation. Going back to what I said earlier in this video, you don't want to cross major streets. Now, you know what a major street is, and you don't want to cross a freeway, and you don't want to cross a bridge, and you don't want to cross a hill. So these are all things that you don't want to compare properties to. If you live in an area where there's rivers and lakes and streams and they divide property territories, I'm not necessarily saying your personal property, but they do divide parcels of land, then you don't want to compare properties that are on the other side of that parcel. Now, you may be forced to in rare circumstances when there aren't any comparables available, and I get it. But when there's a ton of other comparables, right, that are nearby that don't cross a major boundary, then there's no reason to go seek out that comparable property that's for sale or that's sold just to try to justify your price, right? And what will happen is if you do that, you may run into appraisal issues later on if you do decide to sell the property or refinance the property, whatever it is that you're investigating the value for. It may also be for insurance purposes, but whatever the reason is, you want to try to make sure that you tend to find the properties that are closest to yours without crossing any of those boundaries. So let's talk about time frames. Now, typically you can use comparables, right? If you're going to be looking at the properties that have sold, you can use comparables that have sold within a 6-month time frame, all right? Personally, I prefer to look at properties that have sold within a 30 to 45 day time frame because those give me a more accurate depiction of what is going on in the market, right? But again, depending on how unique your property is, you may have to go 6 months back. And in some rare cases, you may have to go as far back as a year. I'm going to recommend, though, that you try to stick within about a 30 to 45 time frame. So you're going to go back about a month to maybe a month and a half to see what has sold so that you can use those as comparables, right? Now, as far as active listings, again, you're going to try to find the 3 closest active listings that are for sale near you. All right, and then you're going to make adjustments for bedroom and bathroom count, and then you might have to adjust for the square footage, right? But remember, you can only go up 20% up and 20% down. But Paul, my house is nicer than my neighbors. My house is better than my neighbors. I put a gold toilet in my property. Look, I get it, right? Everybody has an emotional attachment to their home, and I appreciate that. And I appreciate that you may have invested hundreds of thousands, potentially millions of dollars into your home. And look, online valuations and even valuations that I perform personally without having seen the home don't always reflect all of the amazing things that you may have done to your home. Those are things that we can take into account a little bit later on. But what I'm giving you is the bare minimum that you need to know so that you can price out what your home really is in comparison to everybody else. Once you've done that online valuation, and then it'll give you a pretty good idea of what your property is worth. Okay, Paul, so what do I do if I have a multifamily dwelling and I need to know how much this property is going to be worth? Well, in that scenario, what I would suggest is you reach out to your local real estate agent, your local real estate broker, and what you can do is you can request a valuation for that property. Again, if it's a multifamily property that is located in a rent-controlled area, then the rents are going to have a huge impact on the value of the property. So you're going to have to be prepared to provide the rental information so that we know. If you live in a multifamily dwelling yourself and you're going to be vacating that property, then that the rents clearly won't have as much of an impact on if it's just income property, right? So keep that in mind as well. But the online valuations is probably not the way to go if you're trying to value your multifamily properties, okay? All the other rules will probably apply for 4 units or less. So if it's 4 units or less, you're gonna use the same type of techniques that I talked about earlier, the 20% up or down, the $10,000 per bedroom, and the $5,000 per bathroom. I just armed and made you dangerous. Use the information that I shared with you at parties. Go and impress people. Show them that you can get the values of their home just by looking at it. 20% up, 20% down. You're gonna be the rave of the party. Look, I know it's boring, but at some point you're gonna wanna know the valuation of your property, right? You might be doing a refinance. You might need it for insurance purposes, or you might be thinking about selling. Hopefully I've given you enough information to where you can compare what the values are going to be like based on what is out there on the internet and based on what you can see within your neighborhood, all right? I appreciate you watching this video. Feel free to comment below. If you have anything positive, negative, you want to make fun of me, that's okay. I'm pretty thick-skinned. Go ahead and comment below. I look and review and respond to all of those comments. Please start a dialogue. Let's help each other out. In addition to that, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. We're working really hard to make sure that we provide you with great content, and we're curating content as well. And lastly, don't forget to hit the alerts button so that you can get alerts anytime we upload content. All right, I appreciate you taking the time. I'll talk to everybody soon.